Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And hello and welcome to another edition of the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. We are on episode 18 today, Insider Threats and Privilege Escalation, Abuse of. I am Ryan Healey-Ogden, the Director of Business Development over here at ClickArmor. I am sitting in for Scott Wright, our CEO and founder today. So I thank you all for welcoming I welcome you all to the panel and to today's show. I've got a couple great panelists. One over here is Sid from Greenpeace Canada. I'll let them do a quick introduction in a minute. And the other is James Castle of the Cybersecurity Global Alliance and Terra Nova and a few other organizations. He likes to keep himself just as busy as any other cybersecurity professional. So I am going to ask all of you in the chat if you could just drop a quick message to everyone. Let us know where you're at. We'd love to know where our viewers are from. Also, please feel free to use the chat for any questions, comments, engage throughout, and we'll try to, as panelists, we'll try to bring those questions over onto this side. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about insider threats and abuse of privileges today. I'm going to kick things off with a little poll as well. I'd like you all to jump on that and please provide your feedback. And while the poll is up, I'll just hand it over to Sid and James just to give them a quick introduction, and we'll go from there. Sid.
So I'm head of IT at Greenpeace Canada. I've lately been focusing more on cybersecurity, and especially getting cybersecurity insurance.
Excellent, thank you. And James, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. I'm the Executive Director and Chairperson for Cybersecurity Global Alliance, as Ryan had mentioned. Very nice to be in here. I'm also the CEO and Chief Security Officer for the Terra Nova Defense Group, which is a group of defense conglomerates working within NATO and NATO allied countries. And also the Chief Security Officer for B-Data with a new blockchain security program that just went live, and we will be showing at Collision. So really looking forward to the future and what it has, and looking forward to today's episode, and thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Okay, hopefully we can kind of see where people are from. We've got Toronto, fantastic. Kitchener, Nova Scotia. Thank you, David, for joining us from the beautiful East Coast. Hello from Canada's capital in Ottawa, Stephen. I myself am up in Ramera, just outside of Orillia, Ontario. And I hope everyone finds themselves well. So let's jump into this. Let's look at poll results. You should be able to see the results pop up there. So has your organization ever been affected by an insider threat? Some of you said no, some of you said not sure. No one had said yes, but that's not surprising. A lot of these are the incidents that go unnoticed and unreported. Are your organizations prepared to spot an insider threat? So again, we heard yes, no, and not sure. So again, a mixed bag of responses. Again, alarming right off the top that there's a no and a not sure, but it's another attack vector and another threat that might be being overlooked. And which of the below are considered an insider threat? So we have unauthorized or inadvertent disclosure of sensitive information, facilitation of third-party access to an organization's assets, physical sabotage, appearing intoxicated or affected by a substance at work. Someone said all of the above, and then there's none of the above. So the correct answer to that bottom one is actually all of the above. Those are all signs of, potential signs of an insider threat to be aware of in your organization. So awesome work, guys. Thank you very much for participating in the poll. It's just a little bit of, intro and knowledge to us. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again so we can take a look at today's topic. So we are, like I said, at session 18, insider threats and abuse of privileges. We just took a look at the poll, so we're okay with that. So insider threats, the who, what, and how. So an insider is any person Who has authorized access to knowledge of an organization's resources, including personnel, facilities, information, equipment, networks, and systems. An insider threat is the potential for an insider to use their authorized access or understanding of that organization to harm it. And insider threats manifest in various ways. They come through violence, espionage, sabotage, theft, and cyber acts. Just a quick overview, but that's what we are dealing with. So now to open it up to the panel, we're going to kind of jump through a few of the questions. And again, this is where I'd love to hear some comments from the audience, any questions or feedback they have, and we can incorporate it in. So I'll ask the first question to James. What are the most commonly seen insider threats?
Well, I mean, that list is quite extensive, but I mean, you've got disgruntled employees that may have a vendetta against the organization that may allow ransomware through an endpoint. You could have potential viruses, unknown viruses, or the matter of opening emails without actually understanding what phishing to ransomware is all about. The list is completely endless, and as we move into artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT, we have to look at different things like hijacked artificial intelligence with inside trades that can open up those kind of inside threats. The list is quite extensive, but rather than going on, Sid, I'm going to pass it to you, sir.
For Greenpeace Canada, I would say three things: corporate espionage. Number two, ransomware through some attack vector like phishing or something else like a USB or device. And third, some sort of damage to our brand that I can see. What was mentioned was intoxication, but something else which a person could do on social media or otherwise to harm the reputation of Greenpeace Canada.
Yeah, I mean that's like a whole new, I guess, kind of, I guess Greenpeace is probably, and one of the reasons why I invited you today, Sid, because I knew you'd have some, fantastic insight, because Greenpeace being such a organization at the forefront, for so many years, they've had to face insider threats, before it was even a cyber related insider threat. And, that's where, probably, when you guys are having protests, there's going to be people in there that don't belong, trying to get you guys off course. And now when you have kind of, you bring up a very good point about brand, reputation, and management of course, and how threat actors could absolutely, kind of go from that. Now, James, yourself, coming from kind of a not-for-profit with the CSGA side of things, how do you guys kind of, typically, look at insider threats and what that kind of risk is to the organization?
Well, there's so many ways to identify it, either through education or simple awareness, or actually trying to work with our directors in order to train them and prepare them for what to look for. But I mean, that's kind of a loaded question, Ryan, being the fact that we're coming back to Click Armor in order to helping design a program for, as we bring in new directors from around the world, to identify these anomalies and risks. So many of the people, the three of us here, are all actually engaged in what we can do and how to improve the situation. But at the end of the day, it comes down to awareness. And if you don't have that awareness, you don't know what to identify, everyone's at risk.
Yeah, I mean, super valid point. So the second question then I'd like to bring forward: how are these threats usually detected? And Sid, I'll start with you first this time, my friend.
At this time, we do use something called SOC radar, which is a VSOC. This is this is done by without logging and these kinds of things. It's a lot of open source intelligence, looking at the dark web and matching it to various indicators of compromise. We are also working, there are SIEM tools that are run by our parent organization, Greenpeace International. Thirdly, we have various things in place for compliance and endpoint detection and response. So I guess these are pretty basic, but the thing that may be interesting is that that virtual SOC.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we've got a couple of people that have just jumped in as well. Lester, I'd like to welcome you, Fabian as well. If you guys are jumping in on question 2 right now, which is kind of how these threats are usually detected. So drop your ideas into the chat. We've seen from Stephen, you can take a look through logging or looking for breadcrumbs, what the source of the problem was. You want to make sure someone can't get in, break stuff, and get out without leaving a clear trail, which can be used, right? So, I mean, that's, access management, log management. See, it's how insider threats really kind of then spills into so many different aspects of cybersecurity and just general IT as well. And then obviously into HR. I think, just before James, I'll let you just answer the question about, usually how threats are detected. I'd say, how many of us are doing, those regular, check-in interviews with your team? Are you looking for those common signs of disgruntled workers, so to speak? I remember we had, think about into the 90s when there were so many disgruntled workers and there was unfortunate, crimes of violence that were associated with them. It was to this point where people were being overworked and you've got a problem in the economy and you have all these different factors where then if they're not respected in the workplace, that's where they're they could take out their frustrations. And so now we're living in a digital world, we have a whole different kind of slew of things like Sid, you mentioned social media. People could just kind of start to slander and destroy the reputation, the brand of Greenpeace. Or James, I know we've had conversations in the past about potential threat actors trying to join our organization in order to gain intelligence, about what is being talked about and what problems are trying to be solved. And so, those are things that unfortunately I don't see these tools capturing, right? Like a great SOC radar and SIM tool and all these different things, they're gonna get that time, where someone plugs in a USB drive or someone opens up files that they don't have access to. And to Stephen's point, we'll follow those breadcrumbs. But I think one of the overlooked parts of the equation again is the people. And so how do we talk to our people to ensure that they're comfortable, they're happy where they're at, they're not looking, they're not in any monetary issue. A quick story pops to mind. It was I was over in the Middle East, and it was for a large country. There was someone who worked on the cleaning staff in the office of the president, and they became compromised by a third-party threat actor. This person was found on, I believe, Facebook, approached and said, "Hey, we know you're in financial trouble." Because again, this person had been posting on Facebook that they were in financial trouble and that they needed money for a surgery for a family member. So the threat actor approached them and said, "We can solve all of your financial problems. All you need to do is plug this USB drive into your boss's computer." And it was done. Eventually it got traced back to the person who did it. They were arrested for the crime and down. But there's an insider threat that was again not going to be detected until it was too late. And good thing it was detected at the end of the day. But that all comes back down to your people and understanding them and their problems.
That's right.
And yeah, and James, how would you say that these threats are usually detected?
Really is understanding the insider threat environment is important, and realizing that these are people with legitimate access to your networks. They are people who use their access in a way that causes harm to the organization as a whole. We got to identify that insider threats can be difficult to detect, and in most cases, they go really unnoticed for months, if not years, and some of them even longer. Whether the insider is a malicious employee or a contractor with compromised credentials, I mean, the list is completely endless. But we have to be able to identify this. And Ryan, what you're saying is correct. We have to understand behavior analysis. We have to be able to identify privileged access, what the people have, why they have it. Are there any anomalies in their life that may lead them? Have they been in communication? It's really important for CISOs and CIOs to really identify those risks early so they can work proactively uh, and assess any type of insider threat process that may be brewing. And this can lead from everything from the simple cyber attack to what CSGA, or Cybersecurity Global Alliance, talks about regularly, which is cyber terrorism. And this can lead into a brand new verse of destruction against corporations and countries with damaging critical infrastructure. The list is completely endless, but with what we have seen, insider threat prevention solutions are less digital and more focused on personal.
I mean, it's a totally valid point, and I just quickly thought, like, while we're talking, so how do we incorporate more technology into trying to filter this out? And maybe a part of our answer could be through AI, and maybe this is one of the positive use cases for AI to be able to kind of validate some of the information that your employees are providing. How are they? What's their tone in email? Are they having, and these are different things where now we could be crossing over into privacy issues. But if you had, more of a monitoring system on the intercommunications of your corporation, could you indeed find insider threats before they're about to happen based on the way people are speaking to each other, based on the questions that some people may be asking, those of superiors that they shouldn't be asking about, different access rights and controls, right? So it's, I always wonder about how do we get ahead of a problem that's very human driven. We can't read minds, but we can start to like build a baseline. And I think, James, you kind of hit that as well with trying to understand, what people should and shouldn't be doing, and then trying to categorize it a little bit better.
Really, and sorry to jump in here, really to identify this, that artificial intelligence is at such an early stage. A lot of people in the world today think that, oh, AI, it means sentient life. This is not the Terminator. This is not a movie series. Real life identifies that AI can be a serious threat to our globe, as identified by Stephen Hawking when he was alive, that the threat of AI can actually lead to the end of humankind. However, if we look at AI as the resolve, nothing takes away from the human brain from being able to identify the problem and work with it in real time. And if they can't do it alone, we, like at CSGA, we partner with organizations all over the world to create solutions based on common ground that will actually create strategies like this in place. This is a serious threat, and this is a time for real decision makers to get up and do something about it.
And I mean, when we look at it too, I think there's up to 60% of current data breaches or can be attributed to insider threat, right?
Yep,
so
that's right.
If we're there's a lot of different stats out there that really continue to point, unfortunately, back to the people. And if it's a process, is it a disgruntled thing? Is it a crime of opportunity? Is it just trying to dethrone someone that is trying to do good in the sense of a Greenpeace or other not-for-profits? Sid, any other thoughts about how we can detect these and how we kind of move forward as organizations?
What came to mind while you two were talking is our vetting process. We do have such a thing, but in hiring both HR and line managers are very eager to have people start and have access to all. And I feel that is a threat, and I have mentioned it multiple times. It's a battle going back and forth, making people understand. And I think
Mhm.
education of the senior management team, C-level executives is huge, and have them understand risk.
Mhm.
That is something that I see is lacking.
Yeah, and
You
so
know,
how is
Sid,
so what's the pushback? Sorry, James, what's the pushback on why they don't want to, kind of go down that extra road of due diligence?
That it exists to some level at our parent organization, but pushing it down to the culture of all of our offices around the globe. There are 27 different distinct organizations, and we all affect each other. Like our email, our files, everything are stored in greenpeace.org. So if Southeast Asia or UK has a breach, it'll affect us. It'll affect the US. So this culture being pushed down to um, to organizations which have different philosophies is uh, difficult. We're an activist organization, and people are
Mhm.
very independent. Most of our organizations don't have a great deal of money. Seeing the value of the risk assessment and doing and having cybersecurity as an important part of budget has to be be there, and the
Yeah.
time involved in educating staff is
Yeah,
yet
not
another.
and not to mention, I guess, then the balance of, I guess, privacy versus security, right? And that's what it
Absolutely.
kind of comes down to. It's maybe a poll question I should have asked, but how many of you are willing to go through a more stringent background check to secure a job? If your employer is, trying to prevent, insider threats, like, would you be willing to go through, and I know a lot of us in this industry have to because of, security clearances and things like that. But again, those security clearances don't ask a lot of the personal questions that could, turn people into kind of inside threat actors. And I think that's sometimes, where we could kind of be missing that piece. James, any
I,
thoughts on that? Because I know you have a ton of experience in that realm.
yeah, we're a NATO broker record, and I can tell you firsthand, as chief security officer for my organization, when the military does a screening on somebody, it's quite thorough, and they will find a needle in a haystack, but not only one needle, they'll find 10 needles in a haystack, and they will bring them to the forefront and make sure that everyone in the corporation via directors are aware of the situation, so corporations can make the right decision to avoid that kind of insider threat. But you know what? Swinging back here to Sid, I definitely want to support him on something. I'm not selling myself here, but I'm a Canadian ambassador for the EU Commission, and we represent over 64 countries in circular economy, green tech, the environment, smart cities, and so on. And I've been doing this for 9 years. And in this time frame, a lot of people forget that technology, especially insider threat, where it becomes more critical, especially in critical infrastructure. Let's take it away from the world of technology for a moment and look at agriculture and farming. All it takes is one threat actor to drop a poisonous substance into a waterway, a natural feeding waterway, and then everybody's without water for 2 months while they try to figure out how to deal with this. Threat actors have an opportunity to play really serious critical issues that will not only disable companies, but critical infrastructure that could lead us to starvation, thirst. I mean, the list is endless. I mean, it's just like taking a nerve agent and putting it into the atmosphere and letting it go on a windy day. Meanwhile, you have hundreds of thousands of people dead. Everything is infected. There is another form of threat intelligence. We need to be completely aware of our environment. And CSGA, for example, spends a lot of time with Ryan, who is on our board, to really identify those risks so people can be aware. And that is done through awareness. We don't have all of the answers, but with the ones that we do have the ability to reach out to people and allow them to see what they may not have seen before and be able to share in it, because it's really quite amazing what happens when a person starts to realize outside the box what this world needs in order to create those preventions in place, not only in insider threat, but in everything we do day to day.
I mean, that kind of wraps up, it's awareness. And what Sid was kind of saying, we have to bring awareness, has to start from the top down. Sid, any last thoughts before I move on?
Not at this point, but I would like to work more closely with James to understand.
I'd be happy, Sid. 100%.
Definitely broker a quick introduction offline, even though you guys are aware of each other. I'm just going to jump in and share the screen here before we move on to our third question. Again, if any of the panel, any of the attendees in the chat want to give any feedback, any experience with insider threats, any thoughts at all, I'd love to bring that to the panel as well. So this is where we have to, we get to pay for our show, and it will be a small little plug for ClickArmor, but it is very topical. So ClickArmor, this session is hosted and brought to you by the great team here at ClickArmor. We provide engaging, interactive, and gamified security awareness training for organizations of all sizes internationally. If you or your organization has any interest in learning more about how ClickArmor can provide training around insider threats, phishing, and social engineering, and all the different attack vectors, please reach out to us. We'd love to walk you through a demo or set you up on a free 7-day trial. And so now that the bills are paid, I will continue to move on today onto our third question, which is what awareness content and other communications are appropriate to educate staff on insider threats. So I know we've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can kind of expand it out a little bit more. Let's put yourself in the seat of, okay, you are in charge of security awareness for your organization. Insider threats are a priority and have not been addressed. What would be the plan moving into to try and tackle this? James?
Well, I'm going to love to answer this. It really comes down to, look, awareness is only one touch. I mean, corporations here have to realize that in order to build awareness, it is a payable skill. It's not a matter that we can just show up and give free information all of the time helping people. Companies do not want to pay money to understand this. They expect one person appointed, like a chief information security officer, that receives 5 days of training, which has no way of actually learning all of the skill sets that are required in order to identify all the threats and the risks that hit a corporation or a global organization every day. A fine example of critical infrastructure threat, Israel has been slammed with well over 300,000 cyber attacks in the last month. No, I mean, how do we identify those risks? Because companies are just not able to identify, and Israel is one of the strongest regimes in order to identify these kind of risks, because they have been fighting this on multiple borders for 100 years, well, 100 plus years. But I think really at the end of the day that, people need to identify that there is a lot of information that can be found, real information, not the kind that's going to build smoke and mirrors, as I like to call it. People need to be aware of their environment, plain and simple. But the thing is that companies need to allocate at year end to identify that these kind of costs exist, because as the world becomes more and more deep into the black hat and the insider threat, we need to start adapting. And right now, the world is not looking good for being able to justify that kind of insider threat globally.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely valid. Sid, before I let you answer, something I thought of as well is how do we, let's say we are in charge of this for our organization. How do we prioritize hiring, which we're all kind of way behind on, right? We're all trying to fill jobs like left, right, and center that, there's more empty jobs than qualified candidates at times, versus securing your organization. Because, especially with kind of a lot of these younger startups where you see this accelerated growth in this hockey stick kind of platform, right? They are at times just trying to hire as much as possible. but then where do you sacrifice that because you all of a sudden have brought someone in? But Sid, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Um, Awareness, I want to echo what James said, and what I said previously is making C-level executives have the organization top down, understand the value of doing these risk assessments and paying for education of staff. Just starting with that. Um, I fight a battle with a little bit of attrition, as I go along with this, because money has to be allocated to towards all this. As James said, you can have some free content that is out there, but a structured course of a structured course that is provided by HR, required by HR, has to be there, and not just on phishing and these kinds of attack vectors, but about the entire threat landscape, and also threats, as I said, teaching about reputational threats, and having consequences there for these things. Lastly, having an understanding of compliance and the details of compliance have to be there, and obvious things like access have to be known, and why that access is cut up in a certain way.
Right back to access control. I mean, I think there's I guess my question too would be, it's who owns it, right? Who owns the insider threat in an organization? Is that the security team? Is that the HR team? Is that the executive team? Who's going to know the people best that they're going to make a wrong decision? But going off of access, Stephen in the comments, he said, recommended step, don't allow administrators to share admin accounts. Like, so basic, but how many times have, we come across admin or, admin password, and, then all of a sudden, you can't track these things. So then one small little thing has a trickle down effect. Right now, your log management is useless, because if your logs are, all the same user, then how are you going to differentiate the actions of one person to another? So again, I think it's organizations trying to find ways to cut corners, to speed up time, to make processes people better. Plus, now in this age of quiet quitting, there's also this extra kind of pressure that staff seem to feel like from their, oh, my boss is watching me, or I don't like their involvement, I don't like all these questions, and I'll just quiet quit, or I'll just quit for real. And again, it goes back to that attrition, issue of, we don't have enough people in this industry, but at the same time, we can't just openly trust everyone. James, again, you've got experience with this, with almost 100 board members on the CSGA and applications coming in weekly. It's how to sift through legitimate good talent versus people that are just there for the wrong reasons. And I think this is going to be a challenge we're facing for a while.
There's a lot more to it, though, than that. I mean, here's a fine example of insider threat. Just this morning, I received a contract forwarding to me from a DocuSign. Now, DocuSign's a reputable company. It has a good, strong background in security. Anyways, one of the things is that if you're not expecting something, there is a good chance it is a phishing attempt, and people are getting more and more creative. You need to be able to identify those risks. We can sit there and we can scan all the people we want and be able to identify security and threat, but the one thing that we can't do is violate the law. We are obliged, in order to following the law specifically, and when you take in a person's privacy or their private information, there's a specific code of conduct that people have to adhere to. Stephen's comments in that, I mean, focusing about multi-level authenticators is one thing, but there are different multi-level authenticators that are worse than others. Now, would the common person be able to identify that? I mean, what we sit down and we tell people is, if you take our antivirus program, you're going to be protected from ransomware. Sorry to say this, guys, but you know what? I know I can't say it on air, so I'll short it. BS. You need to be aware to that environment. You need to understand what you're buying. A lot of people don't want to buy the right thing because they're being sold the wrong things when it comes down to the real issues. And we need to be able to identify this, not here, not in Toronto, not in Ottawa, not in the United States, everywhere, because the situation is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. You know, I'll give you a fine example. I was just laughing about this a little bit earlier, and Ryan probably is looking at me going, "What are you doing?" CSGA, this is not a silent area. CSGA is filed with the Guinness Book of World Records to do the world's largest cyber drill in multiple countries. We were originally looking at doing a red team, blue team, but after having this episode, I would be much more interested in developing around insider threats and being able to identify that kind of risk on a global situation, to seeing if multiple countries are truly ready for this kind of insider threat. Because I think that topic is a whole lot more important than having a red team, blue team attack. But
that's a little bit more topical. I mean, with organizations,
exactly.
again, another stat to kind of report back on. I love stats, but it looks like about 76% of organizations that were polled fear that the insider threat is where they're going to get hit next.
Yes,
right.
That's right.
And that comes down to another thing that I thought of is supply chain attacks. And I know,
yes.
James, again, CSGA has done a lot of work with supply chain attacks. Sid, you guys would have some suppliers down the supply chain as well for probably, media and different things like this where we don't think of. And then one of my top ones that recently happened to us in Ontario is the LCBO. These are all supply chain attacks. These are all which are insider threats. These are people that have access to your organization, your data, your customers, and your code. And, they can use that turn that into a malicious, approach. And so it's another thing where I think the awareness factor comes back to play, because then if we start to poll and ask all our security expert friends, well, where would you classify, kind of a third party, supply chain attack? Maybe they wouldn't consider it to be an insider threat, but it is, because you've given that person that access to your organization. And as we defined at the top, anyone who has access to that, contractors, permanent staff, just the cleaning crew that comes through, it can be almost anybody who has that access to your organization could unfortunately be, an insider threat. And that's why this becomes such a scary topic, because it's like, how do we focus our attention and where do we focus it first?
That's well said. You got to think about that from a different side. Let's look at news and media. News and media are not experts in the field, but they will take information and express to people what will win dollars. So identifying what is fake and what is real is a real challenging thing right now. But a lot of people say, well, if it's on TV, it's right. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And again, still back to awareness.
So I'd like to mention two things that came to mind. Talking about the supply chain and vendors. If one of our vendors who takes credit cards loses PCI compliance, that affects us. And this is not an intentional thing, perhaps, but it's a very real threat. We would have a hard time getting it may spark a PCI compliance audit for us. And have we ever done such a thing? We don't. We comply with what our outsourced supplier does. So that's one thing. And working from home has opened up a huge can of worms, and like who has access to machines that have been given. Do with zero trust being rolled out, is that enough? Or it like and what does it actually mean there? We have all of our software as a service encapsulated in Okta, and we are moving towards something which only allows access to all of our systems through that encapsulated um, app. So it's not something we can do yet, but if right now, if somebody signs in on a browser on some computer and leaves it signed in, external to the office or or their work assigned machine, that's just open, and they are a threat there. They have made a new attack vector. So if this can be mitigated, it would be a huge win.
That's actually that work from home thing. Gets my brain spinning, because again, it's caused so many positives, right? Here we are, all three of us currently working from home right now, having this great conversation, joined by probably an entire group of people that are majority from home or have some sort of hybrid, right? So great, we have the benefit of being able to be remote and dynamic. However, I wonder how that's affected insider threats. And there's a stat I'd love to find for the future, because have we seen insider threats increase or decrease as employees have been pushed home? Because one side of things, one side of says to me, I think you would have less disgruntled employees if they're working from home, right? They'd have less interference in their personal lives before they got to the office that could cause them to not want to be there or have, see opportunities, right? Again, if you aren't walking the halls and overhearing, things and start to learn information that you shouldn't, then potentially you may not act on that. That being said, the flip side, I'd see it. Now you have employees working from home without any sort of oversight and without that kind of check-in method, right? Like we all remember, years ago when we all had to go to the office, and it was great because you'd run into your boss or coworkers or peers or even people from different floors or whatever, and you'd have those chats and those interactions and stuff, and you'd always get a sense of people. You could tell when people are having a bad day. You could tell when people are, maybe asking questions they shouldn't be, or people are underperforming, overperforming. We don't have that sense of kind of connection to our employees anymore. So, I wonder if that is going to be allowing the floodgates to open up more, because people will just be, working in their own environment and not really, being monitored, or, the flip side. Just to kind of wrap it up, I'll leave that to you guys with some thoughts.
I'm just going to jump in with one final comment here. Really, this kind of reminds me of what is called the skipping rock syndrome. If you're going to, most of us as kids, if you've been born before the 80s, you've probably picked up a rock and thrown it at the pond to see how far you can skip it. The thing is that the impact from a single skipping stone is going to be very low, because the impact or forcing impact is going to be less than me taking a big boulder and dropping it off a bridge and hitting that water. It is going to create friction. It's going to create a stronger wave, a stronger impact, and the expansion of the ripple will be even stronger. So we have to look at this as the insider threat here. We have the smaller agencies that are going to be sitting there and going, well, you know what, it's only one person. If it's an active cyber war, you're talking about everything everything you have, all your assets, all your finances being gone with the swipe of a single button. So what is
that's
the
what I mean. To
insider
Sid's
threat?
point, right? The Sid's point is extremely bad. How many different organizations operate like Greenpeace, where you could have someone in Singapore, become an insider threat, and that one person in Singapore affects an entire international organization with offices in Toronto and all of this. Now, laws are completely different, understandings are completely different, and Sid might, even though he knows security inside and out for Greenpeace Canada, might not even be aware of that incident. That's another thing, where we look at this is about reporting. How are we reporting insider threats properly? Are we actually dealing with them properly to make other organizations aware of the attack vectors, of what to look for? Or are we just lopping things into groups? Like in Canada, we don't have to report cyber breaches unless they contain personal information, right? Okay, so great. If an insider threat, decides to take your entire, catalog and sell it to the competitor, we might not have to even know about it as a general population. So then how are we going to prevent our teams from making the same mistakes? Right. Sid, any kind of last thoughts here?
I just want to learn more. I see that things are changing very fast, and I'm always open to learning. I just want to stress again the importance of making C-level executives understand and take ownership of and assign just a very basic thing and assign a budget to these things.
I absolutely, it's a fantastic way to wrap it up. James, any last thoughts?
Last thoughts. One thing I just want to say for Greenpeace, thank you for all the efforts you do worldwide for saving our environment. First off, for my last comments, look, we're only touching the very tip of the iceberg today, but I mean, these are highly relevant topics. We've been working with ClickArmor closely and with Ryan and Scott and his team. And I can tell you that their words are very important. So if you have an opportunity to tune in for future shows, believe me, this is worth it. Thank you, folks.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, James. Sid, Ali will echo that. Thank you for all your hard work with Greenpeace and everything else. Thank you very much for joining the panel today. It was a pleasure to have you and speak with you. James, thank you again. Pleasure to have you. Any takeaways from the chat? Anything, did we learn anything new today? Is there anything that's kind of, the alarm bells are going off? That's what I'd love to accomplish with these forums, that maybe we can, like Sid said, get that information in front of the C-levels or the senior decision makers so they can understand the problems. That's why we're here today, and I thank you all for joining us. We will be back in 2 weeks. Topic to be decided and date to be decided. But the invites will be out there. We'll be all over LinkedIn, and I hope to see you all back in the near future. Thank you for spending the hour with us today, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.